So while browsing the internet, I stumbled across someone saying that the JLPT is a waste of time and easy to pass, and saying things like Chinese people can just pass N1 no matter what. And I'm not going to post it here because the purpose of this channel is not for me to get into drama slap fight accounts of their creators, but I've seen this discourse before, so I wanted to make a really quick video about my opinions about the JLPT and discuss what it is, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. I'd say on both sides. I think it'd be good to kind of clear the air. To note that I'm speaking not just as an academic and someone who studied Japanese, but someone who has passed N2 and N1 and has sat in on N5 and N4, as in walked around and made sure people aren't cheating, being hired briefly in that capacity on more than one occasion. So when people say the JLPT is worthless, they're wrong. All right, we're done. No, they do have a point in that the JLPT is not a test of your ability to speak Japanese. There's no speaking section, and it doesn't test your ability to write Japanese. As a result, no, the JLPT, including passing N1, is not a signifier of fluency. And while I've seen people discuss like this mysterious Japanese learner who actually can't say a single word but somehow passed N1, I've never met them. I don't think that's a real thing that happens very much, if at all. Certainly there are people who have not passed JLPT or can't pass the JLPT who are much more confident and skilled at the speech element or just at communicating in a natural way with Japanese people than some people that have N1. That's absolutely true. It is possible for you to be an extremely good Japanese user without being able to pass N1. And we'll get into some reasons why that is in a bit. But this does not mean the JLPT is useless, although its use depends on the level and your kind of personal goals. For level 5, I will kind of be honest and say that it's mostly a personal thing. No employer that I know is going to be like, oh, you have N5, great, we will hire you, we can expect you to work in Japanese. It's not enough to get into a Japanese university, but it is a nice little benchmark of your level. So N5 is kind of useless in terms of like proving something or getting something, but it's not useless if it's a goal of yours and you want kind of benchmarking early on in your Japanese journey. And the same is kind of true for N4. The one contrast is I would say that like if, there's some kind of business that has Japanese customers come in at all, not like an international business, but even just like a local tourist one, whatever, where you're getting a part-time job, and you mentioned you had N4, that might be of value to them. Certainly you can do some basic stuff, but it doesn't really open any major doors. That said, it again can be a nice milestone. It's always good to have milestones to work for. N3, if you're not familiar, didn't used to exist, but basically there used to be 4, and the gap between 3 and 2 was so hard, so they added 3 in there to kind of break it up. And so 3 has kind of a weird place. In a country outside of Japan, in some kind of business where there's regular interactions with Japanese people, I imagine that N3 would actually be looked on quite positively by any employer, as it shows pretty solid reading abilities and listening abilities for sure. That said, it's still not the level that is like listed as mandatory on, for instance, applications to Japanese universities, a lot of kind of jobs. These kind of employers or institutions do usually have ways for you to show your Japanese proficiency besides the JLPT. But N3 does have kind of a weird place where it's not officially accepted, but it is a solid accomplishment. It does show enough talent to work within the Japanese language to some degree. N2, though, is where things get really important. And this is where the statement that the JLPT is useless is just not factual, because N2 is specifically listed as a qualification, as a kind of barrier point for entry into a lot of jobs in Japan for non-Japanese people, as well as a lot of university programs. Even the JET program, for instance, mentions N2 when discussing how to become a CIR. Yes, it says functional equivalency, so you can prove it other ways, but having the document proves it. The other important thing about N2, and this is also true about N1, is that the test stops becoming as much a test of grammar, vocabulary, kanji, etc., although it still is that, and it becomes much more a test about can you read authentic Japanese texts and extract important information about them to the extent that you can answer questions about that content that often involve kind of trick answers that are almost correct but not really there. These tests are in part an ability of your ability to take a test in Japanese, which is actually one of the reasons it's valuable, because if employers see you have N2 or N1, they know that you can read complicated documents and extract information out of them, which is kind of the skill that they're looking for with that. They also, of course, have listening sections that are often quite complex, and again, require you to understand nuances of conversation. And that is an incredibly useful skill, even if you're not using it to get a job or something like that. N1 just does more of the same. Honestly, N2 opens up way more doors than N1. Ironically, N1 is often kind of, for personal accomplishment, just like N5 is. I've never seen a position that says you must have N1. I'm sure they exist, but if you have it, it's obviously a benefit. It's more impressive than N2. But I think a lot of people stop at N2 because honestly, that will get you most of the way. So does this mean these tests are useless? Absolutely not. I don't think there's any way to argue that with a straight face. And I've seen many times people say these tests are useless in the same breath that they say they have not passed anything above like N4 or N3. But that said, while these are major accomplishments and you should be proud of every level, including N5, not having the JLPT, even failing the JLPT, is not evidence that you are bad at Japanese, just as having the JLPT does not mean that you are perfect and flawless. But they are good tests and they are well designed and they have a lot of really tricky questions that do test your understanding of Japanese in important ways. And that is why, just to finish up real quick, if you see any discourse online about how people who know like Chinese can just go in and take the test, that's simply not true. It speaks to a fundamental misunderstanding of the differences between the Japanese and the Chinese languages, especially their writing systems. Because yes, they both have characters that came from China, but these characters don't have the same meanings all the time. And even if they did, the text is not just about kanji. Again, N1 especially has long essays where you have to extract information. So even a simple sentence like "Pan o tabe saserarémasen deshita," or "was not forced to eat bread," a person who has never studied Japanese at all but has a background in Chinese will know that the sentence has something to do with eating, but there's no way they could ask a question that's even as simple as like, what did the person eat and was it on their own volition? None of that information is conveyed in kanji. Additionally, and this is something that people who have a background in English actually have a huge advantage of, there are questions throughout N1 which are super easy if you speak English, because they'll have like a blank and they'll have 4 katakana words there, not kanji, katakana words, and if you speak English, they're easy, because it'll be like intuition, information, etc., and only one of them will make any sense, but it's not kanji. Similarly, honestly, when I took the JLPT, when I took N1, the listening section had a section that I thought was super easy because it was full of katakana words. Everybody that takes the test is going to come to it with some of their own advantages and disadvantages, but trust me, nobody passes that test just naturally, even Japanese people. So that's it. I hope this clears some stuff up. If you're keen to take the JLPT, or you have passed it and you're proud of that, don't let people on the internet discourage you. But on the other hand, if you're struggling with it, but you are not struggling in making connections in Japanese with friends and reading material in Japanese that you enjoy, don't feel bad about it either. It's a useful test. It does open doors, especially past N3, but it's not the end all of anything either. And there are even other tests like the Kanji Kente or the Business Japanese test that you may find more useful depending on your particular goals and interests. And that's the end. I have no conclusion. Good luck if you take the test. Good luck on whatever else you do if you don't.